All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Game Music Composition. My name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director from the class, and I will be hanging out with you over the course of the month. We have a lot of material to get through today and to get our month started overall. So we're going to start out with an overview of the class, talk about these class sessions and your assignments towards the end of our class today. We'll definitely go over all of the week one assignments, mainly your game composition. And so the class as a whole is built as an introduction to the world of the music composer working on game compositions, or working with game teams, developing the soundtrack. And we'll talk about both the music and sound design aspects and the great creation of the full audio soundtrack for a game. We'll talk about what is unique to development of music for a game, what is similar in the production and creation and composition of the audio. We'll talk about the role of the game composer, what sort of skills do you bring to the table, what is sort of expected as the music composer, who hires you, who has approval, who has creative control, who signs your paychecks, all of those important aspects of working on a kind of a team-based project. We will talk about different ways that music is actually working in the game. More towards the first half of the month, our focus is more on the creative side of how do you really start from nothing. We kind of have that blank DAW session and start figuring out what type of music you need, how much music you need, where does it all go in the game, how is it going to function and work and change? Because certainly there are aspects of production of music for games that is unique. One of those key elements is the fact that music for games is a non-linear source. Most music that you've probably ever listened to or created or worked with is in a linear format. Music just its nature exists in a linear format where you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and every time you rewind back that song and listen to it or through it again, you are going to hear the same result. The artist works tirelessly. They go into the studio and focus on the performance and the instrumentation, the composition, the capturing and recording of the perfect performance of the song. You go through the mixing stage and you listen to it over and over again, crafting the perfect mix and making everything sound as polished as possible. You go from 100 tracks or well, let's do this. You either go 20, 50, 100 tracks, whatever it is, however large your session is, and kind of mix it and combine it down together to a final stereo mix. And that is put on a CD or a disc and shipped all over the world or streamed online, and everybody hears the exact same version of that song for a music album. Or movies are the same way. Every time you put in a DVD or stream a movie and you rewind it back, you are going to hear the exact same mix. There is you watch a 2-hour-long movie, there is a 2-hour-long audio file that represents all of the music and sound effects and dialogue for that movie. And each time you experience, and everybody who watches that movie will hear the exact same thing. But for video games, the experience should be unique to everybody that plays the game. You have this extra layer of interactivity where you hand a controller over to the player, and so all bets are off in a general sense, where you don't know what the player is going to do or in what sort of order they're going to complete or make their way through the game. So you will have a different experience. The music for a game does not exist in its final form until the game is actually played. And you can certainly play games for a long amount of time. They have a lot of content there. You can bring out your phone and play for a couple of minutes. You can get involved in a console game or a PC or Mac game, and there is certainly many hours of content. People get lost in games for 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 hours there. Certainly if you get into an online multiplayer game, it goes on and on from there. They're just massive experiences overall. But that doesn't mean that there's 100 hours of music sitting on the disk somewhere. And it's certainly not in all one long linear file that plays from beginning to the end of the game all the way through. Music for a game is built from lots of little chunks or pieces of music that are either a couple of bars long or minute long phrases, or multiple minutes long, that make up the changes in the action that goes on in the game, so that as the player makes their way through the game in whatever direction or whatever order that they go through, they will have a unique experience, and what they hear is going to be put together to reflect all of the changes and actions that are going on in the game. Meaning that as they play through, it will play back seamlessly as if that's the way it was intended from the beginning. So you have to really work with your music through all of the changes or variations or permutations that might be possible in the game. You often, as the game composer, you know what is possible because you're part of the game team, the game development team, so you know every aspect of what the game is about and what it's possible of doing, but you don't know when anything is going to happen. And so how do we build a music soundtrack where you don't know when any of the changes are going to happen or need to happen, when the player is going to be creeping around trying to be all stealthy, where the action takes place with the big battles, or maybe the monster jumps out and is supposed to scare the player at some point. And you know that all of that stuff is there and is possible, but you don't know when anything is going to happen. So creation of music for a game takes some unique aspects and approaches overall. The actual production of the music, however, is very much the same. It's still composition, it's still music theory, it's still orchestration and instrumentation and all the technology and the mix and plugins and synths and recording and microphones and instruments and all of the same approach to making the music is certainly very much the same, but the final result, the final medium, what the music is actually going to do is certainly going to be unique for games. And so we'll talk all about those different approaches and what is involved with all of that. So the first half of the month is more on the creative side. Towards the second half of the month, we will start talking about some of the technical sides of how your music actually makes it into the game. This is often where the hurdle comes for people that want to move over into the game industry. They know how to make music, they know how to record, they know how to compose, produce, they can make sounds, they can make music, they can create WAV files. I know I can have a folder full of WAV files, but how do I actually get them into the game so that when the player hits a button on the controller or triggers some action to happen, the correct piece of music plays as it is supposed to. So we'll talk about some of the technology that's going on behind the scenes of how your music is actually functioning in the game. We'll talk about software and some of the tools that are popular for audio development for games. We'll talk about audio middleware options like Fmod and Wise. We'll also talk about game engines and how your music and sounds actually kind of plug into the game itself and trigger and play and react as intended. So we'll talk about game engines like the Unity game engine and the Unreal game engine as tools for development. So that is the overall flow. Oh, I'll just let you know I don't see your screen, just the waiting screen. How about that? Look at there. Did that not work for you? Hey, sorry about that. In all of my rushing around, I got it set up there. Well, I haven't switched slides overall. Went from my intro slide there to a class overview. So hi, sorry about that. I got that all set up, but thanks for pointing that out. Definitely want to get that going. All right, so the class itself, we have our Tuesday and Thursday live classes from 3:30 to 5, and this Tuesday class is going to be a bit different from the other classes because, well, at least the other Tuesdays, because there's a lot of intro material and discussion and terminology and talking about the class and the assignments, and so a lot of introductory stuff that we want to start out with for the month. And then the rest of the Tuesday classes each Tuesday we'll always talk about your new week's assignments. So in the second half of tonight's class, we will talk about week 1 assignments. Next Tuesday, we'll talk about week 2 assignments and all the way down. But in the second half of those classes, of each of our Tuesday classes, we will do a bit of peer review. We'll load up, you have the opportunity to take your submissions, to take your game composition. Each week you have a series of games that you will be creating all of the music for. And you will have the opportunity to post up your composition in the feedback and peer review assignment each week. And then on Tuesday, that gives us an opportunity to load them up and do a bit of a video discussion of the different approaches and allows everybody to hear everybody else's work. It's great for the individual because certainly if you're in the live class, then you can ask questions and we can discuss back and forth your project. If you're unable to make the live classes, you can catch the archive where I will do a video feedback of everything. And then everybody will get a written feedback and a grade sheet for your assignment. But this allows a lot more interaction and detail. So definitely take the opportunity to submit your projects for peer review, so that will give us some things to listen to through the rest of the month. So our Tuesday classes will be a discussion of the new week's assignments and review of the previous week's assignments. Then on Thursday, our Thursday classes are going to be more focused on information about the industry, the role of the music composer, how do you build a soundtrack, how do you format it for delivery to the client, how does the music actually make its way into the game. So a lot more of the information about the industry, the creative side, the technical side, and it's just kind of an overview. That's where a lot of the information that's beyond the class certainly is discussed. So those are Tuesday and Thursday classes, and then each week we have a series of assignments where the main assignment is a game composition. We have 3 games throughout the course of the month that you will be working on, and each one of those are a fully working, functioning Mac game where you will be creating a custom soundtrack, music soundtrack, and all of the sound design, so that by the end of the month you will have 3 functioning games with the entire audio soundtrack is your custom creation. for use in demo projects or showing off to clients or showing off to employers. We have different styles of games, which require different approaches for the music. So we will show off our first game tonight. Hopefully everybody's taken the opportunity to download this week's assignments that were released Monday morning. And I will definitely go through in detail all of the first week's assignments. So let's see. Let's get into other aspects here. This is me, Chris Latham, course director. I've been with Full Sail for about 14 years now. Before they had a game audio course, I was working more in the consoles, in the studios, and in the post-production classes. So that's really where my history was before. Full Sail was in post-production, radio and television commercials, dialogue, sound effects, music, composition, just development for post-production media. And I've always been an avid gamer and wanted to mix my love of audio and games together. And probably about 10 years by now, the industry really kind of opened up the tools and the software to really start picking apart games, and you could switch out audio and music and sound effects, and really dove head first because I found a lot more opportunity in game development than I ever found in recording studios or post-production, and a really great environment, and the challenges of the technology and all aspects of music composition and sound effects and dialogue, everything that I enjoyed about audio was all there, along with the interactive nature of how games work. So when about 7 years ago, when Full Sail got on the game audio train and we created a game audio class in recording arts before the music production degree ever came online. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, when music production came, I jumped over to do this game music composition class, built the class up. So whatever aspect it is about audio and composition and recording or hardware or software or the creation of music for all sorts of formats, whatever it is, whatever you want to talk about, certainly get into contact with me and we can chat about whatever aspect you are interested in. I am also teaching the campus class on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so I'm in lecture and lab there. I am away from my desk phone, so email and iChat is probably the best way of getting in contact with me. On Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I am around my desk, so you can call me there, but if you can't reach me, then email is always the best way to go, or iChat. And if you have any issues with the class or questions or anything like that, go ahead and reach out. Beyond that, I have a website and Twitter. I have a game audio contracting company called Engine Audio, where we work on all sorts of different projects like this. So currently working on a game called Depth. It's an underwater sharks and divers multiplayer game. It's available on the PC. Also, we have EA Sports here in Orlando with Tiburon Studios. They work with... They do a lot. Well, they do most everything with Madden and NBA Live and some FIFA stuff and PGA Tour. So I'm currently working with them on Madden and NBA 17 that's coming out eventually. And I've worked with them on a number of games in the past for some of their audio contracting. And what else? Some field recording and composition and all sorts of different aspects. So have a history in games and production overall. A couple of things that I want to point out for the class, 2 disclaimers that I want to throw out there pretty early on. And that is, number one, you don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. We certainly aren't grading you on your ability to play the game or the fastest score or your highest score, the fastest time, or your actual skills at playing the game, because that is not of what is important. So I certainly know that people coming through this class have a wide variety of experience with video games. Whether there's certainly folks that eat, live, and breathe video games, are up in all the newest and latest games and technology and the companies that are making and developing those games. And if that's you, then I can certainly nerd out all day with you on the game industry and how it works and fun, cool games and all that sort of stuff, and the music that goes along with them. But I also know that there are folks coming through the class that haven't played video games since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man. And that's also perfectly fine, right? I also understand that the workload that comes with this degree program often keeps people away from that very important gaming time. And actually, it's the real important time is focus on your studies overall, but hopefully you can get some of that stuff in there also. But the focus of this class overall is certainly to write music. That's what we are here for. Those are the skills that are required for this class. It's not your skills in playing video games. It's the skills that you have been working on all the way through this degree program. The skills that are expected of you are your skills in music production, music theory, composition, understanding all of your tools, your DAW, and all of your electronic instruments, sample libraries, synthesizers, production, mixing, recording, all of those skills that you've been working on all the way throughout. So our focus certainly is writing music and being able to realize kind of the creative direction for the game and be able to render it in a music soundtrack. So that's really disclaimer number one, is you don't actually have to be any good at video games to be successful in this class. The other disclaimer or question that I get pretty early on is, do I have to know programming or do I have to know code to be able to be successful as a music composer in the industry? And those are two very heavy different skill sets. Those are full life studies, both music and computer programming, and rarely do they ever cross over. We've had the audio director out at, not audio director, an audio lead out at EA Sports, Jesse Allen, come in and speak with our students. And that's a very common question for both sound designers and music composers. Do I have to know code? Do I have to know how to program in order to make this happen? And the answer is a big no. The full answer that he gives is, if you can create sound effects, do sound design, then that is a very valuable skill set. If you can make sound effects and compose music on top of that, then that's extremely valuable to a company. And then if you can create sound effects, create and compose music, and also program, then you are a unicorn, because you probably don't really exist. And really those skill sets are rarely ever crossed over, or often with a lot of experience down the road. So it's certainly not. Now, of course, any added skills that you have, if you have the ability, the knowledge of programming, or even, it's not even like, it can often not be just deep like C++ engine coding. It's often can be some scripting or other aspects, but being a full-on programmer is not necessarily a requirement. Now, there is a lot of technology going on. There is a lot of software and how it all works together. And if you understand some of the language that a programmer speaks in or thinks in, you might be able to communicate your ideas, because working on a game is a mix of creative aspects and technical aspects. So the programmers can't write a piece of music just as much as you can't write a piece of code. And that goes for all creative aspects, whether it's the visual, graphics, animation, or if it's audio or sound design. All of those folks are not necessarily expected for their massive programming skills. What you are expected is to be able to take the director, producers, the developers' creative direction and create music from it. So I also have a very important concept in this class, the second one here, which is game research. Certainly in this month and continuing on, you need to be focusing on some game research. And game research means playing video games. You need to be aware of video games and up on all of the games and developers and what works and who are the composers and who are the sound designers and what's the publisher and the game developer, who made the games, how did they make the games, what was their intention overall. And so this goes along with keeping up and playing games to not only to certainly have fun and enjoy them, but to study them and understand what makes them successful. This goes for any industry, right? If you are interested in the music industry and you want to be the artist, you want to be a producer, you want to be in a band, you want to own a studio, you want to live and work in the music industry, recording and making music for albums, then you should be paying attention to all aspects of the music industry. Not just one particular genre, listening to all genres. Why is it popular? Why is it good? Why is it bad? How did they make it? Who is the producer? Who's the band and artist, the recording engineer, the studio, the record publisher, basically the whole process of how they made that happen. If you are into film, you want to be a film composer, then you should be watching tons of film, having a sort of, what am I trying to say, a language of film, and having the knowledge of when clients speak in terms of previous projects. Musicians speak in terms of previous albums, film directors and producers speak in terms of previous film projects, and game developers speak in terms of previous games. So that means you need to be up on all the latest media, the industry as a whole. It just so happens that in the video game industry, it's video games. So when people are asking you why you're playing more video games this month, you say, I am doing game research. And I am playing the game and listening to the music, and you should be listening to it hopefully with new ears or in a new light overall as we kind of divide or delve into how this all works together. And along with all of that fun music and video game playing, there's certainly a lot to learn. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes of how this all works. There's a lot of things that are kind of break your brain in a traditional sort of way to kind of show the new ways that music is actually working in an interactive game. So there is certainly a lot of knowledge that comes along with all of this. So that's our focus overall throughout the month. So let's talk and get into the assignments as a whole and talk about your first round of week one assignments. So first and foremost is don't fail. Well, that's easily said and certainly not difficult to do. It can be challenging overall throughout the month, but if you follow a couple of guidelines overall, you should have great success through the class. And so the first suggestion here would be download all of your assignments as soon as possible. Download them on Monday when they are released and check them out. Go through all of the documents, watch the videos, get a sense of what the assignments each week are about. If you can come to class, ask any questions that you have of the assignments. If you can't make the live class, then send me an email. where we can discuss any sort of issues overall. Basically, don't wait till Sunday night to open everything up because there can be a lot of work involved in it, and becomes much easier as you pace yourself throughout the week. There are some technical aspects. It is software, it is video games, it runs on your computer, so there can be some technical issues that you might run into. So the earlier that you run into those issues, the better off we can, more opportunity we have to fix them. So definitely take advantage as soon as you can to download and check out all of the assignments. Actually, I'll do my weekly poll here in the chat. Have you guys downloaded our week 1 game called 2D Platformer? Has everybody downloaded the game and checked out the game and played the game? Give me a heads up in the chat that you have maybe had the opportunity to check it out. If not, go ahead and while we're chatting through all of this stuff, take the chance to download it and then after class, all the games are fully working games, so you certainly want to play through the game to get a sense of it and see how the game plays and how you might build your soundtrack. So first, that's the first one. Download everything as soon as possible. Number 2 is revisions. Each week, starting after week 1, you'll have the opportunity to do revisions. You will turn in your assignments on Sunday evening. Each week, your assignments are due Sunday. Then the beginning half of the week, the following week, I will go through and grade everything, create grade sheets, and give feedback on all of your assignments. Each week there are 3 main assignments and a 20-question quiz. So I'll give feedback on the 3 main assignments, and then by the end of week 2, you will be able to make any changes, make any updates, take the suggestions, the feedback from the grade sheets, and incorporate and make the changes into the assignments, resubmit them by the next Sunday, and we'll go through and it'll give you 2 things. Number 1, it'll up your grade overall, improving the project. They're basically, with the feedback, it's almost like a roadmap to improving the project overall. So the people that do have the most success in this class do all of the revisions. And also it will improve your overall project and your compositions. The assignments are all well and good as assignments in the class and as grades, but the real focus of the game compositions is to have demo material, to have something to show off, to add to a portfolio, to show your music working in a game. So I can't necessarily expect you to knock it out of the park every single time the first time. So there is a revision process. That's a very common approach in development, working with the game team. They give you their ideas and intentions, and your job is to interpret those ideas into music, and you send it off to them and they go, yeah, that's kind of what I meant, and yeah, I really like this thing over here, do more of that. Oh, I really don't like this thing over here, so we don't need that. And it'll kind of be a process of revision and revision until final approval. So there is a revision opportunity for all of your assignments each week. So definitely take advantage of that. Where did my mouse go? There it is. Here's a breakdown of each of your weeks. Your game composition is the main assignment each week. All of the other assignments are generally based off of that. You have a new game with a new approach to the music each time, a different style of game, a different musical approach to it, and then you take some aspect of those game compositions and use it for your technical assignment and your production technique. So the technical assignment this week is to take your composition and format the files into multiple file formats. You'll be bouncing it out into lower resolution files or into, and also core audio files. Because when you make a game, you'll probably have the high resolution files at either 2496, or all of our assignments are at 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. But you will also release lower resolution files for maybe a website, or core audio files are the main audio format for iOS devices, for Apple iPhones and iPads, for all the gaming over there. So you would deliver files in multiple formats. It's the same music, but it needs to be ready to go, so it can just be plugged in whatever else it needs to, wherever else it needs to be. The rest of the month, your technical assignments will also be sound design for each game. So week 1, this week our game is called 2D Platformer. You'll do all of the music for that. And then week 2, you'll start with a new game, but you also have the sound design for the previous week's game. So in week 2, you'll do all of the sound design for your week 1 game. Week 3, you'll do all of the sound design for your week 2 game. That way, by the end of the month, you will have both music and sound effects for all of the game projects. So everything that is heard through the game is your creation. Your production technique is taking the music that has been composed and formatting it in certain ways, or some other production approach for these game compositions. This week it's all about looping. Looping music files is extremely important in games. Looping music allows you to sit in one spot musically, waiting for the player to do something, to solve the puzzle or find the secret door or whatever it is. And then so it stays in one spot, looping around and around and around, and then, oh, they figured it out, so now we can transition and move forward. So looping music is used in all of our assignments. Let's see, what else? Week 2, we do a chiptune composition, so we'll talk a bit about the history of audio for games, and we will also be relying on the restrictions of the first original Nintendo Entertainment System, the music that was created with that. So to get a sense of where we've come from with our music, we go back and do a retro kind of 8-bit chiptune composition. You will also be doing orchestral templates and working on finding clients and all sorts of different aspects that we will approach throughout the month. Each week there's a 20-question quiz. Those are typically based off of the Thursday class archives and slide presentations. So we probably want to wait until those are released. Each class will have a class archive that is released the next day. So this Tuesday class will be released as an archive on FSO. They show up as announcements in your FSO inbox. So that'll be released on Wednesday, and then Thursday's class will be archived and released on Friday. And then this week you have a discussion question, which is kind of an open-ended to kind of get a sense of where everybody's at with games. What do you play games? What games do you play? What's your most recent game? What's your favorite musical experience in a game? Just to kind of get a sense of where everybody is at with that one. So let's discuss our first round of assignments and our first game here. Let me take a quick pause for just a few seconds before we get started on this one. Hold on. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about your first game here this week, called 2D Platformer. All of our games are created, or let's see, all of our games are designed in the Unity game engine. We will talk about that. This game was created by Unity Games to demo their game engine. A real quick definition, game engines are kind of like the DAW to make games. That's a horrible kind of relation overall, but it's the main tool that is used to make games, just in the same way that your DAW is your main tool to make music. Well, certainly beyond the instruments themselves, but Unity games and the Unity game engine is very common for a very common tool in the game industry these days. If you play a lot of mobile games, iOS games, Android games, more than likely some of the games that you've played have been on the Unity game engine. And so to demonstrate their technology, Unity Games releases lots of little types of games to kind of show off what they're capable of doing. And so our game here, called 2D Platformer, is in the style of a platform game, and it's also 2D or two-dimensional because it's flat and you go left and right and you don't kind of go into the game engine, into the game image. So very appropriate here. 2D Platformer is kind of a really silly concept. It is based in London. The London is being taken over by with an alien invasion. You can see the alien ship has landed here. This is London Bridge. It has fallen down. You can tell it's London also. You got Big Ben over here. It's broken, and the London Eye is broken. And so you play a bean with a monocle and a top hat and a mustache and a bazooka. Yeah, it's a bean for some reason, and you are the only thing that can save London from the alien invasion. And it's a very simple game, simple approach. You can go left and right, and you can jump, and you can shoot the bazooka. Actually, let me put this on loop here so I don't have to keep rewinding. And so we have a unique musical approach. The game is free, available online. I don't know if they actually released this on iOS and Android, or if somebody's done it. But it is available, all the software. That's one very cool thing we will be talking about through the entire month, is that all of the software for game development, for the most part, is free for our use for educational purposes and non-commercial purposes, and even sometimes commercial reasons, which we'll also talk about. But for our purposes, a free available demo for us to... it doesn't have music or sound effects. Actually, it has the original sound effects, but that's your job. You are going to replace all of the music and sound effects for this game. So let's talk about the musical approach for this one. When you download this assignment, not only do you get the video here, but you get a couple of documents that talk about the game itself. Let's see, where's my... here's the music design document. Gives an overview of the project itself, and then an overview of the game. 2D platformer games have a long pedigree in the industry. Classics like Super Mario Bros., Donkey Kong, Metroid, or modern games like Limbo, Braid, or Jetpack Joyride are all 2D platformer games. And really, most of the purpose of a platform game is to run and jump between different platforms, and shooting and either moving from left to right or moving up or down, or but a pretty simple approach overall to the music. So the way the music is going to work, well, let's start with the style and the genre overall. I do leave it pretty wide open for the style of music for this game. Now, there are a couple of things to point out. It's probably It's kind of a silly, wacky idea, lighthearted, probably family-friendly game. Your music doesn't need to be too dark or intense or sad or dramatic. It's just keep it upbeat and light overall. But the style of the music, whether you want to use acoustic instrumentation, electronic instrumentation, whether it's going to be jazzy or funky or folk, or it can be, I have in here, what did I say here? Musical style. It can be a little bit, what I have, Monty Python meets Mars Attacks or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers. You can certainly play up the fact that it's in London. You can maybe have a little bit of alien invasion in there with a theremin or some creepy, not creepy sounds, but alien kind of synthy pads. But if you want it to be rock or hip hop or electronic or orchestral or acoustic or whatever it is, that I leave more up to you, because games in week 2 and 3 get a little bit more specific in their style overall. So that is more of the genre. So lighthearted, fun kind of music. The way the music actually works. Let's do this. Musical style, ideas of instrumentation, but this is really what I want to get at here, is the asset list. The asset list is going to tell you exactly the files that you are going to create. You are going to create a total of 9 files. Those 9 files, you have 3 intro files, 3 main loop files, and 3 ending files. You'll see that they're all 16-bit, 441K for the sample rate, stereo files. The intro files are going to be 2 bars each. The 3 main loop files are going to be 8 bars each, and the 3 ending files are 2 bars each. So we have 3 different groups or 3 different types of files, and each one of those has 3 variations. So 3 intros, 3 main loops, 3 endings. And the reason for this is through a combination of variation and randomization, we can give a sense of a lot more music and different combinations, and generate kind of a longer soundtrack overall from lots of little different pieces here. So this is generally how the music will work. When the game starts, right about here, right as Mr. Bean here drops down and lands for the first time, the intro music will start playing. Let's see here. I have Logic set up. Let me go ahead. Did I load up my... Let me do this real quick. Load up the demo project. Let's see. Week 1, 2D platformer, and demo. Yes, close. Don't save. All right. So these are 4 different student examples. Each track represents a different composition, a different song. So we have 3 main loops. So let's get all the 3 main loops over here. And I'll zoom in here in just a sec. And we'll also listen to all of these so we get some examples. We have 3 endings, or 3 intros, and 3 endings. So let me do this also. Hide those. Actually, unhide. Are these all muted? Mute. Mute, mute, mute. Hide, hide, hide. Hide. Okay, so to give you more of a visual example of all of this, we have 3 main loops. Each of these are 8 bars long. These are going to loop also. So they have the possibility, when any one of these plays, it can jump to any of the other ones or jump back to the front of the same file to loop around, and it will always make sense. we have 3 intros. These are each 2 bars long, and the intros will eventually, the game will put these back to back. So intros will play into the next cue. It can randomly choose any one of these 3 intros to then go into any one of these 3 main loops to provide more variation each time. And then we have 3 endings. And these need to, these are when your player loses a life, and or they can either fall off the edge or they lose all of their health, and one of the 3 ending cues plays. So we have 2-bar intros, 8-bar main loops, and 2-bar endings to make up the soundtrack for this game. So let's go back over here. The main character drops right in, and one of those 3 2-bar intros are played. Now, the game only knows and is expecting 3 files named exactly music intro 01.wave, music intro, or actually capital M music underscore capital I intro underscore 02.wave, capital M music underscore capital I intro underscore 03.wave. And it is looking for files named exactly this way and formatted as 16 bits 44.1 stereo files. So, because it knows that there are going to be 3 files there named exactly this, it randomly chooses one of those in the game. So it will, let's say, choose intro 2. So intro 2 plays, it plays through the first 2 bars, and then when the 2 bars are done, then it immediately switches over to one of the 3 main loops. Right here. All right? So it doesn't know the tempo of your music or the time signature or anything like that. It just knows whenever I finish one of these intro cues, then I'm going to randomly choose one of these 3 main loop files. So let's say it chooses main loop 3. Plays through there, goes all the way through the end to the end of the file, and says, okay, I'm done playing with this. Well, then it randomly chooses back one of these 3 again. It could jump back to the front of 3, it could jump over to 1, it could jump over to 2, and then it plays all the way through there and makes another choice and randomly plays. So this is how, this is the main, makes up the main part of the soundtrack. These 3 8-bar loops are going to constantly be jumping around to the correct piece of music to go through the entire gameplay. So plays all the way through. You have a health bar at the top of Bean here, and he eventually loses all of his health. You can either fall down in the hole or the gap in the middle, or you can see he's got a really low health bar right now. And at some point, oops, no, not there. Keeps going, keeps going. Gets back his health. Right about here. As soon as he loses all of the health points, falls off into the toxic sludge below, and immediately stops playing wherever it was and jumps over to one of these 3 ending files. And so randomly chooses one of these and plays it out all the way through. All right, so let's actually take some time here to listen to this to get a sense of what's going on. Make sure that we can all hear this. Hold on. Let's see here. How about this? Well, looks like it works. Oh, hold on. I just crashed again. Fun. Sorry about that. It should be back up and working now. Let's see here. Just want to double check this. There we go. Okay. Now, let me go back here. Make sure we don't blast ourselves when we start this. So we are listening through some of these examples. Let's start with this. Uh-oh. Okay, can you hear that in the chat? Or give me a heads up in the chat. Can you hear the music? Can you hear me? All that stuff? Okay, phew. Maybe we won't do anything technically crazy anymore. Maybe we can avoid going down. Okay, so let's start over here at the intros. When the game starts, one of these three intro plays. So let's choose intro 3. Do that again. Okay, then it's going to immediately switch over to one of the main loops. So here's main loop 2. Now notice the loop here. Loops smoothly. When it transitions, we'll transition this time into loop 3. When it jumps to the next one, it's also seamless. There should really be no gaps or pauses. And then we'll just progress through the game, choosing randomly one of these each time. We'll jump over here to main loop 1. Now, each cue needs to have all of the instruments of the mix. So you're going to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. Probably need more than just 4 instrument layers. Certainly full drum kit, bass line, maybe multiple layers making up the harmony, maybe multiple instruments taking the lead through the different cues. It can be acoustic instruments, it can be electronic instrumentation, but it needs to be consistent across all 3. These are 3 different files, but they come from the same song. So it needs to be similar instrumentation, it needs to be same tempo, the same key, so they all feel like they come from the same place, but 3 variations. You can just think about it, part A, B, and C. Each one of them needs to loop, so there's no gaps at the beginning of the file or the end of the file, so that it seamlessly loops and transitions from one to the next. The intro cues, these are meant to build up towards the main loop. So they need to feel like they rise and build anticipation heading into the main loop cues. So let's actually do this. So I'll just choose one of these and bring it over to a main loop. Well, we would do this. Let's do this. Take this one, bring in a little gap here, move this. Now, main loop 1 doesn't always, or sorry, intro 1 doesn't always play with main loop 1. Any combination of 1, 2, and 3 is going to play with any other combination of 1, 2, and 3. So here's intro 1 going into main loop 1. So it needs to build up and kind of hang ready to drop on the downbeat of the main loop cue. So maybe it goes to the 4 or the 5 chord, hangs there for a little bit, and then drops back to the tonic back at the front of the main loop. You're probably safest to start on the tonic of each one of these loops, so that as it jumps around, you always know that you're going to return back to the tonic when you start out. Here's intro 2. Here's intro 3 into main loop 2. And here's intro 2 into main loop 3. all of the combinations make sense because they all have the same instrumentation, same drum kit, same bass line, or not bass line, but bass sound, bass guitar or instrument, synth, and similar harmonic instrumentation and melodic instrumentation, so that it smoothly and seamlessly transitions from one to the next. Then at any point, your player or your character can lose their health, all of their health points, and kind of drop off, and it immediately switches over to ending. You are not guaranteed of where you are going to be in the loop. It will just immediately cut off and switch over to one of these 3 ending cues, which works in the game because your game is also cut off. You don't have any more control, it kind of falls down, and it switches very suddenly. So these ending cues need to finish and resolve to an ending so that it kind of completes the musical idea. Ending 2. Now, one thing to watch out for here that you can hear is that all of these cymbal crashes get cut off. So you need to actually leave enough time so that they go all the way to silence and fade out naturally. So you got to watch out for the end of the file, make sure it doesn't get cut off. But notice that musically, all of these resolve. They resolve back to the tonic. The drums kind of finish. The bass, melody, and harmony all finish. Everything returns back to a strong chord, one last note, one final maybe crash, and finishes out the composition. So let's take a listen to some other examples. That one's more acoustic overall. I'll just jump down here. Let's try this one. Go to main loops. Any questions overall of how this is built, how this is going to work in the game? Now, there needs to be changes from one cue to the next. You need to have changes in the rhythm, changes in the melodic lead. That's one of the main places that your cues are going to be unique between them. If it's the same instruments, the same key, the same tempo, then how do you make them unique? And the answer to that is change up the chord progression slightly, change up the bass line, change up the rhythmic percussion pattern, and then change the melody. You should have a new melodic direction each time. So here's the idea from 01, goes into 02. Also notice there are changes in the first half and the second half of the cue. Here we have a kind of a halftime rhythm. Go into 3 intros. Now, I wouldn't really consider this one much of an intro because it doesn't build. It just kind of sits static in one spot. There needs to be a rise. It feels more like a 2-bar loop. It needs to rise up, kind of build anticipation, build up energy. So this one's kind of the same way. There's not much that really changes. It feels like it could just sit there and go around and around. This one is a little bit better because it has a kind of a snare roll build at the end. But even then, that's just mainly the drums. You should also use melody, harmony, bass, all of the melodic instrumentation to also help build that. Let's see, what else? 3 endings. These endings are pretty solid because they do reach silence at the end. Let's see, that's not going to work. But they feel like endings to a song. They don't just... Sometimes I'll just get something that just is a loop that ends. It just gets cut off at the end. So make sure you are building strong resolves, resolutions, and endings. Build that final cadence for wrapping up the composition. Let's try one more here. This is good because it has a strong lead line. It is a little bit too hot in the mix, but it just gives different approaches overall. But it could sit here and loop this idea around. Again, no gaps, no pops, no clicks, no fades. Let's try the second one here. Little changes to the percussion, changes to the lead line. Third one. And do some intro cues. So they are, oh, I got to click on. They are more like traditional EDM kind of builds, which certainly could work for more electronic musical approach. But it does have that rise. It does have that build up in energy, and then 3 ending cues. So you can hear some good modulation effects, pitch ramps for building those endings. So it can be effects, it can be compositional, it can be a couple of different approaches overall, but hopefully that gives you a solid idea in the building of the composition for this game. If you have any questions, go ahead and post that up. Let me just see. Let me go back to... Where is my PDF here? So a couple of suggestions here. Compose interesting loops. This is certainly a big one in that looping doesn't mean repetitive. The loops are going to loop around on their own, and they can get annoying enough looping over and over again the same 8 bars. So don't make them even more repetitive by utilizing the same progression in the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. It shouldn't be the exact same drums, bass, melody in the beginning and the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. So people end up giving me 2 4-bar loops in the space of 1 8 bars, or even worse, 4 2-bar loops in that 8 bars. So you want to make sure you are using the entire 8 bars to develop a melodic idea. Avoid repetition in arpeggiators. Arpeggiators aren't really your lead line. And make sure you develop your full musical idea over the 8 bars instead of just repeating a 4-bar loop. Transitions, make sure loops transition fluidly. You want to make sure you end your melodic idea within the 8 bars and resolve it so that it can go back to the beginning of any of the other cues. This means that don't write a 12-bar phrase and cut it off after 8 bars so it just kind of hangs somewhere in the middle of your progression. Same thing with your melody. You want to make sure that musically you finish an idea so that it moves on to the next cue. Keep the same tempo in all cues. You don't want a real strong jump in rhythm from one cue to the next, which will make it a very sudden change, especially as it does it over and over again as it moves through. Continuous loops, no pops or clicks or gaps. You want to make sure that there are no interruptions or hiccups, stutters in the music as it loops around. You want consistent levels in your mix, so you want a strong signal to noise ratio. You don't, sometimes people have it cranked up in their studio and they bounce the files and you get waveforms that are really, really tiny. You have all of your music has to be mixed in with all of the other sound effects in the game. So you don't want this massive sound effects and it masks or hides all of your music. So watch out certainly for that. What else? Putting your music in the game. You should definitely check out how your music actually works in the game. Your purpose by the end of the month is to have all of your music and your sound effects functioning properly in the game. So the way you do this is you just place files in the correct folder. Here's the game application for 2D platformer. And applications on the Mac, you can often open them up to see what's happening on the inside. So you can right-click here on the application and do Show Package Contents. And in there, you have a nicely appropriately named folder called Contents. Go into Contents, go into Data, and then go into Streaming Assets. And you will find two very familiar folders called Music and Sound Effects. And here's your 9 files. Of course, in your version, this is blank because you are making all of the music. You do have the original sound effects from the game, but you will be replacing these also by the end of week 2. So take the bounced files, 16-bit 44.1 stereo files, and put them into the game. You don't really get a sense of how everything sounds until you play the game directly. So again, that's... where'd that go? Well, you go to 2D platformer, you do Show Package Contents. Inside of Contents there, you're going to find Data, and you'll find Streaming Assets. And in Streaming Assets, you'll have music and sound effects. So right here, it shows you all of this. Go to Contents, Data, Streaming Assets, and Music, and you will be able to place your music in. And the next time you run and play the game, then you'll be able to hear your custom music. So definitely check it out before you deliver everything. Take a screenshot of your session, and then it talks about delivery of how you will upload and deliver everything with your total of 9 files. So let me know if you have any questions on 2D platformer, but that should get you started for this first week's game. What else do we have? Week 2, our game is called Angry Bots, also made in the Unity game engine. It is a third-person shooter game set in some far-off future where you are a mercenary in infiltrating a robot laboratory, and the robots are really mad at you because they don't want you in their laboratory. And we have different robots. Each one of them are having different musical themes. And the main focus of this game is ambient and action, also sometimes known as exploration and battle. Where this is really common in games where sometimes you're just kind of wandering around aimlessly. You're exploring the world. The music isn't really at a pretty low energy level, and then out of nowhere the enemies attack, and you go into full-on battle mode, and then the action music starts playing, typically with a lot of percussion and strong energy that is heard, and it's really transitioning back and forth between ambient and action and how the game reacts to the battles that happen in the game. So we have different types of robots. Each one of those require a different musical theme, and then you also have the ambient theme where there's no robots around, and we'll talk about how a music for this type of game is built. The production style is much more modern or futuristic, probably a lot more electronic. Represents all the robots and the mechanical aspects of the game. And so synthesizers, drum machines, effects processors, all of the fun toys in your DAW. So then our week 3 game is called Palace of Orinthalion. It mimics an open world fantasy game, maybe like Skyrim or The Witcher or Dragon's Age or Dark Souls, or I don't know. There's all sorts of different types of games out there. World of Warcraft, all sorts of stuff. And in these kind of open world fantasy games, you are often the hero of the story, and you're placed in the middle of a town or village to start off on your adventure. And there's lots of different directions you can go. You find different quests and different activities, and you can go off in any sort of direction. So the challenge here is that how do you build a soundtrack where the player can do anything that they want in any sort of order, and they can activate different pieces of music all at the same time. So they can effectively turn on and off different musical cues and listen to them in any sort of order to kind of represent the changes that you would hear in a large kind of open world game. So we'll talk about all of that. This game throws away all of the electronic instrumentation, no synths, no drum machines, all sample libraries we're sticking to orchestral and acoustic instrumentation for this composition. So different games, all with different musical approaches, and different styles of music and different types of games and how what the needs for the soundtrack is. So those are all the games throughout the month. I will probably start out next class with a discussion of the production technique and the technical assignment. Due to our technical issues earlier on, it didn't quite make it for this session. But the production technique is all about looping music. I will show you this. There is where'd it go? This is production technique. There is a workflow. It is 65 slides of step-by-step exactly what to do with this assignment. I will go through it and actually talk about how to do some of the techniques, but you will be going through different looping techniques for creating a soundtrack for a game, because while there is just regular old looping of files, there are a couple of techniques to make it as seamless as possible without any sort of issues, to make it invisible as the music loops around and around. So we'll start out our class talking about that. And your technical assignment is delivering files in multiple different formats. So there's also a PDF describing this process, where you will take the asset list from the game, and in the main game composition, you deliver the 9 high-resolution files, 16-bit, 44.1 stereo files, high-resolution files. Then in this assignment, you will be delivering 16-bit 22K stereo wave files, so you're bouncing out at a lower resolution. Same 9 files, same content of the files, but just formatting them in a different format. You will also be bouncing them out at 8-bit 22K mono core audio files. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next time, and how to properly format your files, because it's extremely important. The games, even though they do amazing things, the game and the computer is kind of really stupid overall in that it only knows to do exactly what you tell it to do. It doesn't know that you meant to spell it a different way, or that you meant to put an underscore instead of a space, or you meant to capitalize it differently. It's just not going to work. It's probably not even going to tell you why it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So you have to troubleshoot and figure out what's going wrong. And if you just format and pay close attention to all the detail aspects of getting everything set up properly, then your music will work in the game no problem. So those are some of your other assignments overall, but that should give you a solid intro to the month and to your first week's assignments. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards, and you can post up or chat about any issues that you might have. But go ahead, Michelle, if you want to post those up, I can relate those to everybody. Let's see. All of your assignments are due on Sunday. We'll meet again on Thursday afternoon. What else? The archives. The archives will be released the next day. So on Wednesday and on Friday, the the archive for the Tuesday and Thursday class will show up. So, all right, that is all from me. I will go ahead and answer some questions here. I can either open up the microphone or you can type them in, whichever way works for you. Hold on just a sec. So the question here is, for the first quiz, where can we find more information about Music Manager, Audio Lead, and etc.? Well, that is our discussion for Thursday. So if you want to download the Thursday slides, all of the information for the quiz should be directly reflected in the slides. And then, of course, we'll talk about it in more detail on Thursday. But where is it? Part 2. Here we go. So you can download these slides if you want a preview of it, or wait for Thursday and we'll talk about different aspects. But we'll talk about jobs in the audio industry, and we'll talk about all the different roles: audio director, audio lead, game publishers, game developers, and we will address all of those aspects. But if you want to get a head start, the PDFs, all of the slides are available on FSO. And you should be able to pull most of the information directly from the slides, but certainly come armed with questions if you are missing any of the information. We can discuss that. But the main focus of that will be on Thursday. Anything else? Let's see. What else? Will I hit on everything? I think that should be it. All right. Oh, okay. Well, very good. Let's go ahead and wrap it up there, and I will see you again on Thursday. All right. Thanks, everybody, and have a good evening.